Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For many years, I have been fascinated by a simple truth about life. Everything worthwhile has a price. The difference is that only a few are willing to make the daily payments that create it. It is an interesting thing, isn't it? We admire successful people. We admire men and women of character. We admire those who build meaningful careers, strong families, healthy bodies, and lives of purpose. We look at what they have accomplished, and we often call them fortunate. We speak of their talent, their intelligence, or the opportunities they were given, but we rarely stop to ask a far more important question. What price did they pay that most people were unwilling to pay? Because every worthwhile achievement has its cost. Not always in money, more often in discipline, in patience, in persistence, in the willingness to continue long after the excitement has faded. We know that good health requires consistent care. We know that financial independence requires wise decisions made over many years. We know that strong relationships require time, attention, and genuine effort. The price has always been plainly displayed. The difficulty is not that people don't know the price. The difficulty is that most people hope to enjoy the reward without making the daily payments. They want the harvest without the planting. They want the destination without the road. They want the success while avoiding the habits that produce it. And life, as it has always done, refuses to make that bargain. The law is remarkably fair. It asks only one question: what are you willing to give in exchange for the life you say you want? That is the question I would like us to consider together today, because I believe the difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is often not luck or opportunity. It is the price a person is willing to pay. The nature of the price. It is an interesting thing about how the price of a worthwhile life is structured. It is almost never paid in one large sum. The price is paid in installments. Small ones mostly, daily ones. So small in any individual instance that the payment can be skipped without obvious consequence. And this is precisely why most people skip them. A man who wants to build his physical health knows the price. He does not need it explained to him. He knows that the body responds to consistent care, that the walk taken this morning, the meal chosen wisely at noon, the rest given properly at night, these things accumulate. He knows this. But this particular morning, he is tired, and the installment is small enough that missing one seems harmless. Tomorrow he will pay. Today he will rest. Tomorrow comes. Another reason presents itself, another deferral, another day in which the account receives no deposit. This continues for weeks, then months. And at the end of a year, the man who intended to build his health has instead built a habit of deferral. The daily installment, small as it was never paid, and the account, never filled, produces none of the results he was expecting. James Watt offers a different kind of illustration. Watt was the Scottish engineer who developed a practical steam engine in the latter half of the 18th century. What most people do not know about Watt is that the problem he was working on, improving the efficiency of the existing Newcomen engine, was considered by many of the most educated men of his time to be essentially unsolvable within the constraints of practical manufacturing. Watt worked on it anyway, for years, not in a single inspired burst, but through the patient daily discipline of a man who had accepted that the problem was worth whatever it cost to solve it. He worked through periods when nothing improved, when the experiments failed repeatedly, when the money ran out and had to be replenished through other means. The steam engine that resulted from that sustained effort was not a stroke of genius delivered in an afternoon. It was the product of years of daily payments, most of them unglamorous, many of them discouraging, all of them necessary. The price was paid, the result followed. It always works that way. The question is never whether the price produces the result. The law is too consistent for that to be in doubt. The question is only whether the person is willing to pay. Why the price goes unpaid. If the relationship between the price and the result is this consistent, if the law operates as reliably as I am suggesting, then why do most people fail to pay? I have thought about this question for many years, and I keep arriving at the same answer. It is not a comfortable one, but I think it is the honest one. Most people do not pay the price because the price is always due today, and the reward is always available only later. That gap between the payment and the result is where most ambitions end. The payment is immediate and certain. The inconvenience of rising an hour earlier, the discipline of choosing the harder option, the patience of staying with difficult work when easier things are available. These costs are felt right now, fully and without delay. The reward, by contrast, is distant, and not merely distant in time, but uncertain in the imagination. A man who has never yet experienced the result of sustained daily effort cannot picture it with the same vividness that he can feel this morning's inconvenience. The inconvenience is real and present. The reward is abstract and eventual. And so the mind, which is naturally drawn toward what is immediate and concrete, consistently undervalues the future reward relative to the present cost. The payment is declined, the deferral is chosen. This is not a failure of intelligence. Perfectly intelligent people do this every day of their lives. It is a failure of what I would call long-range vision, the trained capacity to see the future consequence of today's decision with enough clarity that it changes what the person actually does. I knew a young man some years ago who had the clearest grasp of his own potential I had encountered in some time. He was genuinely talented, perceptive, well-read, the kind of person who, given sustained effort, was capable of building something significant. He spent most of his evenings reading, not the books that would have advanced his work, but the ones that were simply comfortable. He exercised irregularly, ate poorly by his own admission, and had a habit of beginning projects with enthusiasm and abandoning them when the initial excitement passed. When I asked him once why he did not apply himself more consistently, he gave me an answer that I suspect many people could give if they were honest. He said, "The return feels too far away, and right now, I'm tired." That is the honest voice of the unpaid price, not laziness exactly, not indifference, but the persistent preference for the present over the future, the inability to make the future real enough to compete with the present. The person who overcomes that preference, who trains themselves through practice and sometimes through necessity to feel the future consequence as though it were already here. That person is capable of paying the price consistently, and paying it consistently is all that is required, all of it. Nothing else separates the man who arrives at an extraordinary life from the one who does not. What the daily payment actually looks like. The first thing to understand is that the payment almost never feels significant at the time it is made. This is one of the great peculiarities of the price. The installments that build an extraordinary life are, in most individual instances, almost indistinguishable from the days in which nothing particular is accomplished. The man who rises an hour early to work on his craft does not feel, on most mornings, that something important is happening. He feels tired. He feels the friction of the discipline. He would often rather be asleep. What he does not feel, because it is not yet visible, is the accumulation, the slow, relentless, invisible compounding of small, consistent efforts into something that will, given sufficient time, become unmistakable. A stone mason cutting granite in a quarry strikes the stone again and again, and for a very long time nothing visible happens. And then, on one particular strike, perhaps the 100th, perhaps the 1000th, the stone splits cleanly along the line he has been working. A visitor who saw only that last strike might think it remarkable. The mason knows better. It was the 100 strikes before it that made it possible. The daily payment is the strike on the stone. Most days, nothing visibly changes, But the work is being done, the account is receiving its deposits, and at some point, which cannot be precisely predicted, only trusted, the stone splits. The second thing to understand about the daily payment is that it must be made whether or not you feel like making it. This is the part that separates the person who builds something from the person who only intends to. Feelings are unreliable guides to consistent action. The man who works on his most important work only on the mornings he feels inspired will produce very little work in a year. Inspiration comes irregularly and departs without notice. Discipline, by definition, does not depend on feeling. It is the commitment to make the payment regardless of how the day presents itself. I think of Charles Dickens in this regard. Dickens was one of the most productive writers of the 19th century. By the time of his death, he had produced 15 novels of considerable length, as well as a vast amount of shorter work. He was also, by his own account and the accounts of those who knew him, a man who did not wait to feel inspired before he sat down to write. He worked every morning at a fixed hour, at a fixed desk, for a fixed period of time. Not when the mood was right, not when the ideas were flowing easily, every morning. The discipline was the practice, and the practice was what produced the work. The brilliant passages in Dickens did not appear because he felt brilliant on the morning he wrote them. They appeared because he was at his desk every morning, building the habit that made the brilliant passages possible. That is what the daily payment looks like in practice. It is showing up whether or not the conditions are favorable. It is making the installment regardless of how the morning feels. It is trusting, on the basis of observation rather than mere hope, that the accumulation will produce what you are working toward. The price for specific things. The price of a strong marriage. I have observed marriages across many years, and the ones that hold, that remain genuinely close and mutually sustaining across decades, share something that has nothing to do with compatibility and very little to do with the absence of difficulty. They share the daily payment of attention. Not grand gestures, not occasional large investments of time and sentiment. Daily attention. The consistent willingness to treat the person across from you as someone worth your full presence. To ask how they are and genuinely listen to the answer. To remain curious about the interior life of a person you have been with for years, rather than assuming you already know it. A marriage that receives this payment day after day becomes something. It deepens. It develops a quality of mutual understanding and genuine companionship that nothing else can produce, because nothing else takes the same time to build. A marriage that does not receive it, that is left to run on the momentum of the early years without the daily payment of real attention, grows thin. The people in it move apart without any dramatic event, simply by the slow erosion of insufficient investment. The price is known. It is paid, or it is not. The price of real knowledge in any field. A man who wants to be genuinely knowledgeable in his field, not merely familiar with the surface, but truly capable, the kind of person whose judgment others seek out, pays a price that most people in his field decline to pay. He reads beyond what is required. He studies the history of his field, not just its current state. He thinks about the hard problems, the ones without obvious answers, rather than staying in the comfortable territory of the settled questions. He seeks out the people who know more than he does and listens to them carefully rather than waiting for his own turn to speak. This price is paid in evenings, in early mornings, in the hours that most people release to easier pursuits, and it is paid consistently, not for a season, but for years, decades. The man who pays it arrives somewhere in his 40s or 50s at a level of genuine competence that looks to people who haven't watched the accumulation like natural ability. It is nothing of the sort. It is the product of a price, paid quietly, over a very long time. The price of genuine character. This is the one that is least often discussed and perhaps most important. Character, the kind that holds under real pressure, the kind that people trust because they have seen it tested, is not a gift. It is not the result of fortunate circumstances or a good upbringing alone. It is built, like everything else worth having, through the daily payment of choosing rightly when the easier choice is available. The man who tells the truth when a comfortable lie would serve him better, consistently over years. He is building something. The woman who keeps her commitments when circumstances have changed and keeping them is inconvenient. She is building something. The person who does the right thing when nobody is watching, not because someone is observing, but because they have decided who they are. That person is building a character that circumstances cannot easily undo. Each of those choices is a payment, small, daily, often unnoticed by anyone but the person making it. The account fills slowly, but it fills. And the person who has filled it, who has built, through years of small, consistent choices, a genuine character, possesses something that cannot be taken from them by any reversal of fortune, because it was not given by fortune, it was built by them. So I began this morning with the observation that everything worthwhile has a price, and that the difference between those who build extraordinary lives and those who do not is most often found in what they were willing to pay. I want to close with the thing I find most encouraging about this idea: the price is fair. It does not ask for more than a person can give. It does not require rare talent or extraordinary intelligence or favorable circumstances. It requires only this: the consistent willingness to make the daily payment. To show up, to do the work, to choose the harder option today and then again tomorrow, for long enough that the accumulation becomes visible. That is all. No one is exempt from paying it, but no one is incapable of paying it either. The price is designed to be within the reach of any person who decides to pay it. The question is whether you will decide, not in some abstract future tense. Today. What is the price for the thing you say you most want? Not the price in money, though that may be part of it. The price in discipline, in patience, in the daily installment of consistent effort applied to something that genuinely matters to you. Do you know what it is, and are you paying it? Because the harvest you are hoping for is entirely possible. The result you are working toward, or meaning to work toward, is available. The law is consistent and does not play favorites. It only asks what you are willing to give. Give it, and then give it again tomorrow. That is the price. And for everything it produces, it is not expensive at all.